Hey, welcome to Between the Shores. And we're actually at the shore this week. And I'm with Henk. And Henk spoke on Father's Day. And just want to welcome you to our podcast where we kind of go over Sunday and give some other thoughts and some things that happened. And excellent job. Sunday was really, really good. And it was Father's Day is always kind of one of those.
It's a tender day.
Yeah.
For many of us,
Yep.
including me, as I shared.
Yeah.
But I hope that everyone was comfortable in recognizing their journey with their own dad, as well as dads themselves, who are also on a journey in learning to be, good fathers.
Yeah.
Which is what we all want. We want to.
Oh, yeah.
We want to be good fathers.
And we all, everyone has a dad.
That's right.
You can't be alive without a dad.
Well, there's a few that never meet their
Yes.
biological dad.
Yep.
There's the odd case where there's been donated sperm, as you know.
Yep.
Yeah. So some people will never know their biological dad.
True.
Yeah. But we have a heavenly dad.
Yes, we have a perfect heavenly dad,
that's the beauty.
Yeah, which is the only one.
Yes.
So welcome to all, and appreciate your comments, and want to encourage you to check out. There's a study sheet out and a blog already. You guys can see the attachments on this too. But just gonna talk about Father's Day, and one of the things I loved, like you were doing, you guys have the conference coming up, the trauma conference coming up in October.
Yeah.
But you talked about unlocking fatherhood, unlocking the keys to fatherhood. But what is, like right away when you've got skeleton keys, of course.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about the first time getting keys from my dad. Drive the car.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I just said, and there's that whole thing of passing on, but the responsibility and the teaching. And just to tell a short story on driving with my dad is driving home from getting my permit. He pulled over, gave me the keys, and said, "Okay, you've got your permit. You drive now."
Okay.
And we came up on this 90-degree curve, and I just went full speed around the curve. He's screaming, grabbing onto the dash, going, "Stop!" And I hit the brakes, and he looks at me and said, "Have you never driven?"
Okay.
And I'm like, "Well, no, Dad. I just got my permit." And he goes, "You never drove with your friends or your brother and sister?" I said, "No, that's against law." And he's like, "Whose kid are you?" Because he thought I had driven in the farm or whatever, and I'd never, ever driven the car.
Yeah, I had learned to drive the tractor.
Yeah.
But of course, my dad was already gone when I learned to drive a car. So I never even had that experience.
Yeah. But it is just fun, what dads assume, and from one kid to the next. So our experiences are so different in all that.
And my dad never, ever had a driver's license. He was a horse guy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And even when we immigrated, my mom did all the driving.
Wow.
Ever since they were married.
That's wild. My grandmother was my grandmother never learned to drive in her whole life. And that's wild.
Yeah. So we always had horses until my dad became ill, and then all the livestock were sold, and my brothers started to farm potatoes, and no more cattle, no more horses.
Wow. That's so much. And even for your whole family, so much would change. Like, did you ever hear much about your grandfather? And
well, my paternal grandfather and grandmother both also died quite young. I'd never met them, so they were gone before I was born.
Oh.
I did meet my maternal grandparents. They came to Canada actually in 1964 and stayed for a summer for 6 months. So I have very positive memories from my paternal grandfather, who was a committed Christian and actually founded a home church. Oh, wow. Yeah, very passionate about their faith as my grandparents were.
Oh, yeah. Now, I always think it's neat to hear, like, sometimes even like the third generation will pick up stuff, even not knowing. Yeah. And just seeing those different relationships.
So my parents met at a Christian youth event.
Wow.
This would be in the 30s.
Wow.
So, and my maternal grandparents were not that happy that my mother was actually seeing a farmer, because in the somewhat caste system of the Netherlands in those days, that would be below her status. Because
Yeah.
my grandfather was an inventor, a
Ah,
blacksmith, but an inventor who had made quite an impact
wow.
in the farming community with his inventions.
Wow. But not a farmer, just
But
an
not a
inventor
farmer,
for,
just an
yeah.
inventor. So
You
so
can
that
work with
so
them.
that was not a blessed relationship early on.
Wow.
But they persevered, and of course, I highly respected my dad.
Yeah.
But after immigration, he wasn't to me what I needed as a son, because
Yeah.
they were so given to immigration and being successful that there wasn't much time for the
Mm.
younger kids. I was the
Yep.
seventh
Wow.
of seven.
Yeah.
So I missed a lot of dad
Yep.
in my life.
Yep.
Not only early death, but also just not like he would never have come to any of my sports games.
Wow.
Never.
Mm. What did you play?
Played soccer.
Ah,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Now, part of your message too, you talked about well, I mean, we all have, but the hindrances that whether son or daughter that we struggle through, and really how to recognize that, but also see the effect that it
Yeah.
has. Yeah.
Yeah. So being fatherless early, I showed the cascade on the little handout and on
Yep.
the slide of how those of us who are wounded as child, we cascade down and we blame ourselves, and then we take on shame, and then we either perform, become the hero, or become a victim and
Yep.
and hide and get typically into addictions and self-soothing. So I chose the performing.
Yeah.
So I wanted to please my mom. So she always wanted to be a doctor but wouldn't. Her dad wouldn't allow it. And so, well, here I go. I'm going to be a mother pleaser, and that's the path I chose. And so, even in our early days in the mission field, there was a lot of performing to please
Yeah.
God. And that caused, in our first term as missionaries, me to be very judgmental, and not of the local, of our fellow missionaries. Not everybody comes to the mission field because, quotes, they feel so called. Some people come because they are also escaping.
Yeah.
For different reasons.
So
but I easily pointed fingers, and no, that's not godly. You shouldn't be doing that as a missionary, because we were from different traditions and backgrounds. We had some from different nations as part of our mission team. So, as a young, striving Christian, I was judgmental, and I've had to deal with that.
Yeah, so that's part of that
whole cascade on that side.
Yeah, trying to show that you're better or up to the standard, even your own standards.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that was my way of coping with my father, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then throughout coming back to Canada in our practice, we were our own bosses in our practice. But then later in life, I showed the wall.
Yeah.
On that slide, and invariably we all hit a wall.
Yep.
You've known about that.
Yep. Oh yeah, hit a wall. I think I had a bunch of hurdles along the way, and then a wall.
We've had some walls as well, but actually my biggest didn't come until my 60s. And on the diagram, I would put it between kind of that king phase, that Eldridge model.
Yep. John Eldridge. Yep.
John Eldridge. So when I retired from family practice and started a job with an employer, I actually had a boss.
Yeah.
And that went fairly well until I got slapped on the wrist for doing something which I had never been, in my onboarding, had never been told that this was a no-no.
Yeah.
The no-no was to go above the leadership directly to the board. So we were at an event, a dinner, and it was not my intent to sit with board members.
Yeah.
But there they were, and so we started to talk shop.
Yeah.
And then I was brought into the principal's office.
Yeah.
And said, "You don't do that." Now the trigger was the fact that triggered me because of my first day of school, where I was also had a school wound from doing something the very first day of school, the very first recess. I had to stay in because I stood up in class to go out to the window and watch the grader go up the road. Of course, being a farm boy, that was
Interesting.
interesting.
Yeah.
But I wasn't told you're not allowed to stand up in class, so
Yeah.
I had to stand for a recess, and I was
Wow.
my little perfect Dutch boy didn't want to cause any, disobedience to the teacher.
Yeah.
So the hurtful part of it was that she didn't tell us that that wasn't allowed, and that got
Yeah.
triggered when I was 60. That just shows you how
Yeah.
unhealed wounds from childhood can get triggered
Yeah.
well into adulthood, like
Oh.
into her 60s.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just about quit. That wasn't the only thing that happened in that position where I had a boss.
But that was kind of like,
But
this
that
is
was
enough.
this is okay now.
Well, especially when you can justify things in our own life. Like,
Sure.
I'm 60 years old. I don't need
Yeah.
to be doing this.
That's right.
Or the 30-year-old, I'm a grown man.
Yeah.
I don't need to be talked to this. Or the 18-year-old,
Anyway, I reached out
Yeah.
for help
Wow.
and had some counseling and got through it and did persevere and retired with a great send-off party
Yeah.
with good feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where did you sense God hitting you in that, or how did God speak to you in all of that?
Well, just the realization that as a boy, he still knew exactly what was happening. And on the healing journey, Jesus accompanies me back to heal the childhood wound so then I can process the adult wound and get healing and forgive the boss and and then receive deeper healing. And we teach integration of parts, right? There was a little part of me that was still in boyhood that hadn't really dealt with that wound.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful that was part of a healing journey.
Yeah. And it's part of what God uses
Yeah.
to not only heal us, but to show us who He is too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's the faith journey. When we walk in our healing as believers, as Christ followers, compared to a secular approach of inner healing or psychotherapy,
Yep.
we have so much more because Jesus will accompany us, through the Holy Spirit living in us.
Yep.
Jesus actually will come and accompany us on our healing journey, like literally with memory, with presence, with speaking. And that's the incredible part of the inner healing journey.
Yeah, because it's not just take this one thing and replace it with something else.
That's right. And it's not just pulling up your bootstraps.
Yeah, it's not will, mind over matter. Yeah.
It is actually
Presence.
healing that residue that had never had a chance to heal.
Yeah, because none of it's a surprise to God.
No.
And the strange thing I've often thought about too is, which is hard, I can't get my head around this, but that God allows certain things because He loves us and He knows He wants to change us. And this is part of the process of, He knows how we're going to learn.
Yeah.
He knows not just learn, but what we need. And He's going to meet us. It's not a surprise to Him. He was there then. I think of a friend of mine who, when they were a kid, they were on the school bus and had their hand on the seat in front of them. Yeah. And a bully said, "Get your hands off the seat." And they did. And from that point on, they were always someone who, if the bully came around, they just submitted.
Okay.
And they were always a very passive person.
Right.
In their adulthood, when they had gone through a really hard situation, they were like, I'm done. I'm going to leave my hands on the seat.
Okay.
And they went through a period where they were kind of aggressive.
Okay.
And
somewhat rebellious.
Yeah. Because they're like, I'm not being bullied anymore.
Okay.
And through that kind of began to change. And because in some ways they were always so passive and everyone was like, oh, you're so Christ-like. But inside they were seething.
Okay.
And so it's interesting. It may look one way, like you're saying, like you look like you're doing a better job, but really on the inside, it's tearing you up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the core of that underneath is what we talked about as shame.
Yeah.
That is.
Yeah.
That's the core underneath it all.
Yeah. And you can respond to shame crushing, or getting angry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So I really hope that, our viewers will really take their own journey. And as I always say, it doesn't matter where on the journey we are.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not judging you for where you're at.
Yep.
And I hope you don't judge me for where I'm at,
Yeah.
on that logarithmic curve. I don't know if you notice
Yeah.
the curve. That's the opposite of an exponential curve
Yeah.
if you're a mathematician.
Yeah.
But, we grow fast first, and then later life, our growth slows down.
Yep.
And in children, just their physical growth, how they spurt up, right?
Yep.
Especially in adolescence. And then that growth levels off.
Yeah.
So our spiritual growth is like that. So it really doesn't matter where we are on that, and we don't judge each other for where we're at.
Yep.
But we do want each other to be on the journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that's where, I spent some time describing the narrative that we believe in as Christians, as biblical followers of Jesus. Because there's a whole ton of other narratives out there.
Yep.
The I'm calling it now the old-fashioned secular humanist narrative of, we just gotta use science and technology and medicine and goodwill to build, a better world. But where are the missiles flying now?
Yeah. Yeah. It's still not working.
It's not working.
Yeah.
It's not working. So which narrative
Yeah.
are we going to hang our hats on?
Yeah.
I'm hanging my hat on the biblical narrative.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
if you look at all the other narratives, they all fall to pieces on one point or another. The atheistic, Big Bang, random universe.
Yep.
The second law of thermodynamics
Yeah. It's all messing up.
disputes that.
Yeah.
That doesn't align.
Yep.
So the biblical narrative of a beginning of the universe and evil, as we went over it with the keys, because evolutionary theory does not explain, on the one hand, evil like child trafficking and the porn industry. I mean, so much evil. And on the other hand, people who have good hearts and really want to serve.
Yeah.
Evolutionary theory can't explain both.
No.
Because you're going to go one way or the other.
Yeah.
So I'm a firm follower in the keys in that narrative.
Yeah. And Jesus is, everything we need for how to not just get over the wall, but to know that everything before and everything after is all a part of what he is trying to do for us because he loves us.
That's right.
Yeah.
And to be on that journey, I had a quote where, if you get your story wrong, you get your ending wrong.
Yep.
And I just saw another quote from Alistair, philosopher in Scotland, who had a very similar quote, that in order to know your path, you need to know the story you're in.
Yeah.
So I really encourage all of us to just think twice about the story we're in, where we are on the journey, and how we take the next step. God doesn't always show us. I had that nice picture of that island road.
Yeah.
I don't know if you...
Yeah.
That's PI. That's real PI.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That was...
the road looked like it had some off-island gravel on it.
No, well, just a little bit on the hill, but it is a PI dirt road, classic with all the foliage.
Yep.
So we could see down the road a piece, but then it takes a curve, and you couldn't see beyond the curve. But we need, God will show us the next step.
Yeah.
If we're in the story, He'll show us the next step.
Yep.
But if we're off the story, or if we are hung up on the wall, if we're hung up on the wall, and unfortunately, stats show that 80% of us get hung up on a wall.
Yep.
80%. Which is sad.
Yep.
And the attrition rate of some of your colleagues.
Yes.
And what's happening now in my colleagues in medicine.
Yeah.
Mid-career.
Yeah.
Just had enough.
Yeah.
So So we need to know when we hit a wall, okay, I need you to help me.
Yeah.
I can't get around it or over it or through it. We need community to do that
Yeah.
because it's not a solo journey.
Yeah.
You either need to have somebody scale you over the wall or show you a way around it, or
Yeah.
even help you dig a hole through it.
Yeah.
But you got to get over, around, or through. And that's where our community,
Yeah.
our faith community, and we're strong on connect groups.
Yep.
Everybody needs to be in a circle.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Well, I keep thinking about like the story of the prodigal son.
Yeah.
You hit that wall. Can you go back home? Are you willing to be vulnerable enough to go back home? And the best part is, God the Father is perfect, and He's the hero of that story.
He is. He's the prodigal, the extravagant father.
Yeah.
But the elder son was just as
just as much a part of the story, but off.
But off. I mean, that was me. I mean, he was striving to be the good boy.
I've done everything you've asked.
I've done everything you've asked.
Yeah.
And now you're doing this for him?
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah.
So he was not what we call a homecoming son.
Yep.
And they both needed to come home.
Yeah. And the great thing is we can come home if we're willing to trust Him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Henk, thank you. And thank you for letting us come down by the shore by your place. And this is Hank's little cabin on the river up behind their house. So their house is up there and the river's back here.
Yeah.
And so it's good to be here. And thank you guys. God bless. And be a part of what we're doing in community and what God is doing all over this world. And He's calling sons and daughters home.
Amen.
All right.
Amen.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right.
Yeah.